All I want to do is talk about that lobster trap. But before we do, you may notice that Ollie and myself are joined by a very special guest, Bandit Survivor. You probably have seen his videos going around on YouTube if you're a fan of the Survivor franchise. Bandit, it's so great to have you here. I mean, start us off. Which do you prefer, the pre-merge era of Survivor UK or the post-merge?
Oh, see, it's tough to say because we don't have a full perspective on the merge. Obviously, we've got our last week coming up, but I mean, the pre-merge, it started off a little bit slow. We kind of got, I don't know how many times, Ollie, Matthew, you can probably correct me, but it was the keep the tribe strong mentality over and over again. But now into the merge, I mean, we've got fluid gameplay, we've got people flipping on each other. So to answer your question, Matthew, I'm going with the merge here. I don't know if I'm the consensus or not.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And Ollie, how about you?
Yeah, the merge has been so dynamic with gameplay. I mean, me and Bandit were kind of just talking about this before we started, but the difference between pre-merge and post-merge in terms of dynamic and fluidity, it has to be the merge. Obviously, we had a lot of tribe strength, and now it's who's a threat to win, which is really good to see.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, we started out this episode with right after Tanuke being blindsided. So we are sort of dealing with all of the fallout from that. And we have Lawrence who says Matthew is probably going to get the credit and the blame for the move of taking out Tanuke. So we really see that the board has sort of opened up in terms of who is going to win this season. Bandit, I saw that you posted a video a couple of weeks ago or a couple of days ago maybe about Survivor winners, and it's going to be interesting to see which type of Survivor winner we end up with if we were to categorize the winner of this season.
And if we were going to talk hypotheticals, again, Matthew, he's 21. I know that you guys probably have better Survivor knowledge than I do in this aspect. I know that Fabio was the winner, 21. He was the youngest winner beforehand. Would Matthew be the youngest winner if he won? Or would Fabio be? Because I know it comes down to months.
So I'm going to find out now.
Yeah, Ollie, you got to find out that answer. While Ollie pulls that up, I just want to say hello to our friends who are in the live chat, which is available if you would like to talk about the episode with the three of us. The post-merge has been fun all the way through. Gabe, I totally agree. And I would also agree about the pre-merge kind of being a little bit boring. I think that's a fair word to use for the pre-merge. It was a little bit like setting up the context of the game. We also have IS who says, oh, the UK merge is greater than the Survivor 45 merge. That's the US season that's airing right now. Also, I know a lot of people feel that way too. So, I mean, this is interesting. It's interesting to talk about Lawrence saying that the move to blindside Tanuke will be credited to Matthew, and he would also receive the blame for it. And we kind of see like the fallout of this move from Matthew, how Nathan reacts to this move in terms of, I mean, Nathan was really close to Matthew. He thought that they had a great relationship and could see him, as Nathan said later at Tribal Council, Matthew was a part of his final three originally. So it's interesting to see their discussion about the whole thing that went down. I mean, what did you two think about? Actually, here's my question for you. Do you see this as Matthew's move?
Ooh.
Yes.
You do, Ollie. Okay.
Yes, because the thing is, even though, yes, we can give Christopher the strategic credit, I think what it did for Matthew's game is it did kind of open up. I think they did speak about it at Tribal. It opened up everyone's game, and I feel like it did help Matthew. And at the end of the day, that move would not have happened unless Matthew flipped. So that's where I give Matthew the credit, because if Matthew decided to back out of it, then Christopher would have gone and it would have still been the Calaton 5. So that's where I give Matthew his credit. Even though there is strategic elements and the manipulation elements of Christopher that he gets credit for.
I think you have to take into consideration that Matthew was in the swing position, so he had all the agency that round. He could have sided with the other people, could have sided with Christopher, which is what he ends up doing. And I feel like he blindsided the right person. Like Tanuke is someone, as Leilani said, you're blindsiding the blindsider, so she's going to respect you if you can be able to articulate yourself with that move.
Right. It's interesting, though, to also see Matthew when he's explaining his reasoning for doing the move. It didn't feel like to me that he took full credit for it. It kind of seemed like he was saying, well, Chris, Peg, Hannah, they all got in my ears about it, about you and Tanuke sort of being the front runners of the end of the game. And I'm curious to see if Matthew does make it to the final three, how the jury will react to that. Well, when they say, well, you even admitted, whoever ends up on the jury, you admitted to me that Nathan, in this case, you admitted to me that other people got in your ear about this. So will I give you my vote? I don't know. We have Gabe in the chat who says it helps Matthew's game because Alternative was third place against Tanuke and Nathan. I think that's a good way of looking at it too, Gabe.
Yeah.
What do you say, Ollie?
And it's kind of like looking at risk versus rewards. Like, yeah, he had a solid final three, but as the person quite rightfully said in the comments, I don't think he beats Tanuke. I don't even know if he beats Nathan. So this gives him a move that, yeah, he might get sniped out before the final three, but if he gets to the final three, he's not a lot more likely to win.
Yeah. I think as well, it will completely depend if he gets to the final three of how, again, we've mentioned this, how he articulates it. Because I think in that confessional you were like specifying, I think the thing that was working against him was how he was explaining it. And it was almost like he was kind of defending himself already. And it was almost like as if he was sorry, when if he does that at a final tribal council, that's where people are going to sit there and go, well, you're not owning the game. You're not owning the moves. And at that moment, he has to stand by his decision. And if he's already kind of trying to blame other people for it, that's where then the loopholes are going to start coming in with his game. And that's why I hope doesn't happen with him.
I really hope it's just him placating to Nathan and saying, okay, this is why I did it. It's those other people. But as you said, Ollie, if that's his actual mentality to apologize to people and push the blame, like, people aren't going to vote for that, unfortunately. So that's going to be worrying.
I think that would be such a cool thing to see from Matthew, is sort of the saying what people want to hear type of gameplay, but to be able to say, no, that was my strategy. Yes. I may have apologized about the move, or I may have said that someone was responsible for giving me the idea, but that was all my strategy to make it seem like I wasn't a threat to you. And he does sort of promise Nathan at this point, like, I promise I'm going to vote with you the rest of the way. You know, it's us to the end, and still trying to, I mean, they both know that that's not true. I would hope so from the players here. But I think it's also interesting that we see Nathan's perspective a little bit more about Lawrence and his part in Tanuke's blindside. And I got to talk to Lawrence and Nathan. Make sure you go check out those interviews with both of them. It was great to talk to them both. But I was so curious, Lawrence, sort of like, he thought the perception was going to be around this move, to not only tell Tanuke about the blindside, but to also say, I know this is happening. I'm just going to vote Peg so that it does, in fact, end up happening. And I won't have the guilt on my conscience about writing Tanuke's name down. I mean, did either of you feel similarly to me, where I don't know how I would feel about this as someone, if I was on the jury voting maybe for Lawrence for the win?
Yeah, when I heard him be like, I've not got a guilty conscience, I'd be like, that's nice. Doesn't mean you win Survivor. Yeah. Like, it's one of those, great, you've done that. But again, I think as Nathan and Leilani both said, he was in on the plan. He knew what was going on. He just decided to openly say, here's the plan. I'm not voting that way. And almost kind of, to me, it was very poor social management, because he was like, oh, I know the plan, but I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to say, like, I'm not going to do anything to squash that plan. I want that plan to happen. I'm just letting you know I'm not being a part of it. So he's still guilty by association in that respect. And to me, if you're in that situation, Lawrence comes across slimier and snakier than Matthew did, because Matthew's still gone like, yes, it was the plan. Here's what happened. But Lawrence has gone, oh no, I'll still let this happen, but I'll do it in a way that benefits me more. I'm probably explaining it really wrong, but either way, to me, it made Lawrence come across a lot more sly.
it's just a very like wish-washy way and like almost like a cop-out way to answer it, because
Yes.
he's like trying to like play towards what he perceives to be the majority, but then he's telling Tanuke the plan, but then he's not voting Tanuke, and he just ends up in this final 7 situation where I don't think I'm going to be blowing things out of proportion, but I don't think literally anyone trusted Lawrence at that point. And that's why they booed him at the final 7. Just he played himself really, and he could have been able to get in the majority there. And as you said, like I think it was Matthew, like if he's at the end and people are asking him, Lawrence, what's your big move? Yeah, my big move is voting for someone that didn't even go home. And I could have told you, but I didn't. And it's just that situation where like he can't really own anything.
Yeah, I agree. And like Gabe says perfectly here, not picking a side makes you unreliable. And that's not a great place to be. And I think Lawrence really had that strategy. He was very vocal about wanting to play in that like neutral realm, which is not a bad idea. But we saw here how it can really hurt your game and end up people don't really know where your mind is, unfortunately. And sometimes people need to be able to predict your moves.
Yeah, well, in this instance, he wanted to be Switzerland. I think he said that either in your exit interview, Matthew, or actually in the thing. But he talked about wanting to be Switzerland. But in the game of Survivor, you can be Switzerland for a round, but you have to do it in a way that it actually benefits you. And looking back, I don't see how this benefited Lawrence at all. Because like as we've said, didn't help him either way.
Yeah.
Are y'all in the mood for lobster? I'm in the mood for lobster because the next day a lobster trap. Yeah. The next day a lobster trap washes ashore on the beach, and everyone's like, "Oh, what is this?" Except for Pegleg. Pegleg's like, "I'm just gonna attend to the fire, and that's good enough for me." But there's a scroll attached to it, and it says that there's an immunity idol locked in the trap. And there are 3 keys scattered around the jungle, but only one of them will open the trap. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. It didn't seem like, well, it was like a couple of people went off to try to find. I thought we were going to get like everyone scattering and trying to find the 3 keys. But it didn't play that way. But we get Chris, who finds the key with Matthew, and then someone walk me through or remind me, how does Matthew end up with the key here?
So I think Matthew pointed it out to Christopher, and then they both come together, and Christopher's like, "It's my idol. It's me. I'm in trouble. You stay put." So they organize that bit to start with. Hopefully that's a good explanation. And then what they decide to do is Christopher looks suspicious if he's going to lob Cage by himself. So they send Matthew to go out, so he's going to be less suspicious, and they leave Christopher back at camp. And then the idol's shenanigans happens.
I mean, this is my favorite moment of Survivor UK so far. I am so happy about how all of this worked out. Only just from an entertainment perspective, I can understand it for the players' perspective, especially Matthew and Christopher. I can understand how this isn't great, but this was just beautiful television. And you know, after, as we talked about the pre-merge earlier in today's stream, I was very, very happy about the entertainment value that I got from this episode. So, I mean, we all know what happens. Matthew's like, all right, I'm going to go open the cage and just like make sure the idol is in there, which I think is okay to do. And I like the idea that you would just acknowledge that it's in there. You know, you can lock the cage back up. So like no one's going to get it. I have the real key. It's going to be fine. But I kept thinking like, why not just take the idol and replace it with a rock? You know, I don't know why he didn't do that.
Who knows? I mean, again, like we said, the strategy element, completely sound. Like Matthew's strategy behind it, and I specifically say Matthew's strategy behind it, absolutely sound. But it was the clasp. It was the meme. I'm going to call it the meme because the amount of memes I've seen on Twitter now, it's the clasp open. Oh, it was poetic. And everyone knew again, credit to the editors for the way they did that, because you knew that was so big and important. And I was like, oh.
I was just about to ask, what was both of your reactions to the close-up of the unlatched padlock?
I know, it's insane. It's one of those moments where it's like reality is often disappointing. Like it's such a beautiful plan. We knew about all that was going to happen. They're going to come at the night and they're just going to pick up this idol and everything was going to be fine. And then they lose it, like literally hours later.
I laughed. I'm not
Yeah,
even going
it
to
was
front.
so
I
good.
laughed because it's one of those things. Again, if I was in that situation, I would be devastated. But as a viewer, and I'm strictly saying this as a viewer, I was laughing. I found it because obviously you knew that that was going to have implications. And I think it was because I think we saw Matthew and Christopher very, very giddy and a bit overly happy about what had occurred. So it was kind of that they were really happy and then they panned it right to there. And I was like, oh.
And
Mhm.
also the fact that Christopher thinks that Matthew got it out of the cage in the first place. So there's just like, we talked about Bandit. I'm not sure if you've been following Survivor 45, the US version, but a couple episodes ago, I think last episode or the episode before, it played like a Shakespearean tragedy. This one was a Shakespearean comedy. Like there were so many funny things going on. I had an audible inhale when I saw that the thing wasn't fully latched. And you're right, the way the editors went about this, cutting in the different confessionals and them being like, "Oh, we're so excited." It was gorgeously set up. And then of
And
course, we go right to the immunity challenge. Yeah, Bandit.
I'm just saying, you couldn't ask this from any other Survivor season. They would just pick up the idol and go, Survivor UK, this is the only season that it could happen. Like Survivor 45, we have everyone just playing so strategically and saying about the positives and the benefits, almost like game bots. Here, we're just leaving idols out in the open. We're just unlocking the cage and leaving it to other people to get. That's Brett.
And it was so great that we had like a full immunity challenge before we went back to the story of the lobster trap. So like we had they built the suspense with how this was all going to play out, and I appreciated it. But we have this challenge. We've all seen it a bunch of times. I like this challenge a lot. It's creating the line of dominoes and then knocking them over at the end so that they hit a target, but you can't, they have like a little, it's like on a
step.
Yes, exactly. So they have to make sure that they don't make it fall. I just explained that horribly.
Do you know what they've got to do? They've got a high step back, which is the name of the challenge.
Yeah.
I know all the names.
I love that. I appreciate it, Ollie. I mean, did two of you have any sort of idea of who might win this challenge? Because Christopher did come to mind for me, but then I was also looking at Hannah as well.
Yeah, I did think that Christopher because of his long limbs, but then similarly Nathan as well. And then Hannah, because I felt like this would be something kind of up her alley. So one of those three.
I was thinking Leilani, and I thought she'd be quite good at quite a few of the challenges that she hasn't won, but like her balance would be quite good. Although I've got to ask you guys, like, we had such a physical pre-merge. Like all the challenges were just about muscle, about strength. There hasn't been a single strength post-merge challenge. It's just been balance or tenacity. Like, do you think that is a conscious decision they made? Because a guy like Nathan, I mean, he was just tripping over that cage every single step. It was going to be so hard for him to win. Do you think it's a conscious decision?
I'd like to hope so.
That is one of my biggest knocks against this season of Survivor UK, which is that it feels unbalanced in the order of the immunity challenges. And I think that a lot of the challenges that they selected to do at the beginning of the season when it was pre-merge, I think that it really set the stage for the elimination order, unfortunately. I think that when we get here and the challenges have this very sudden switch, I'm like, why couldn't we sort of diversify the types of challenges that we got in the different stages of the game?
Yeah. And I think that I hope when they do a season two, that we see that diversity more, because I feel like we've now kind of heard it. We've had a couple of people mention that they should have had more puzzles in the pre-merge, and that's even coming from some of the players. They were like, we wish we'd seen more puzzles, which I think is completely fair, because again, with Survivor, if any fan knows, Survivor isn't just all strength. There is mental to it, there is endurance, there is willpower. So I'm hoping that, you know, moving on to hopefully a season 2, that we see that diversity and that difference.
Exactly.
Well, Christopher ends up winning immunity, and this was obviously good for Christopher because he was definitely a name that was floated out there, especially if he didn't win. So I feel like this was the right time. I can't even imagine a world where the events that happened after the immunity challenge happened and Chris didn't win immunity. Like, oh wow! To see the postseason interview of whichever castaway ended up getting voted out, if that order of events happened, would be fascinating. But we go back to camp. Christopher won immunity. People are basically saying, all right, it's Nathan now. Nathan's going to be the next to be voted out. And Nathan's like, I got to put some effort into finding this key and getting that idol. So he does find a key, and he does get to the lobster trap. And where this was supposed to be the incorrect key, he finds that the lobster trap was left open. And wouldn't you know, everyone's target found the idol.
I mean, if you're Nathan, like, you just must be questioning reality at this point. Just, why is the cage open? Why is the idol still there? What is going on?
I'm like speechless, right? Like there's nothing more to say about this moment other than it was perfect. Everything that happened was just so perfect because of one mistake.
Yeah.
So now Nathan's like, okay, I have the idol. And it was fascinating when I was talking to Nathan, he did mention that it was Hannah and Lawrence were sort of like on their way to the lobster trap. So he kind of explained like they were on their way. They would have seen that the idol was missing anyway. So he thought might as well just tell them. So I know a lot of people had questions about that as well and why he sort of opened up there, I'm sure. But yeah, it was definitely, it was a great talk. If you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and check out the channel. You can click on our little icon below and check out the exit interviews with the 2 castaways who were eliminated from these 2 episodes. Yeah. This, I mean, it was just wonderful. So I have to also bring up my next favorite part. When everyone finds out that Nathan now has the idol. Bandit, let's go to you. What was your favorite reaction from all of this?
I might be skipping ahead a little bit here, but I just love Matthew introducing a split vote by telling the entire tribe. He's like, I want to split the votes, and everyone's like, right, okay, do we have to nominate someone? Or it felt like we were doing like Survivor US talks about like Survivor 45. This felt like Dane and Island of the Idols. Just like, why would you say that to everyone?
Yeah, like when that particular conversation happened, I just remember watching it and going, who are you going to split it with then? Because everyone else is there, babes.
I don't think he realized when he said it in the moment that everyone was there.
No, he definitely didn't realize it. And I thought, again, it was just so funny. The camera angle, obviously, like it was just a group shot. So like you were going to see everyone. But the fact that it was, let's split the votes 4-2. And I think Hannah was like, against who? They were all just standing there.
Yeah. I feel like this pre-tribal, I think it really didn't go, like, it didn't go well for Matthew, in my opinion. Like, just with that moment as well. And then I feel like the conversation him and Christopher had with Leilani, I don't, like, that's one I want to point out. I don't think that was a good conversation either. Because it was obviously, they spoke to Leilani and they were like, right, how are you feeling and stuff? And they basically gave, they didn't say, they couldn't vote for Lawrence. Obviously, Christopher was off the table. Matthew was off the table. There was someone else's name, and it basically only left Leilani and one other person. And even then, when Leilani was like, well, who's the vote then? Both of them literally were like, well, we're just going to have to figure it out, go with our gut. And I'm like,
right.
You've just said to Leilani that you're going to vote for anyone. You're not going to vote for anyone. You haven't said her name, and you haven't said someone else's. I can't remember if it was I think it was Pegleg. I believe it was Pegleg. It was like between Pegleg and her, the names that they didn't mention. And you're still going to go to Leilani, I'll think about it. You're not giving Leilani a concrete answer there. And so I kind of looked at that and I was like, what are you two doing? I was like, just give her a name. Even if it's just like, this is the name we're currently saying, you can go back to her and change it. So yeah, I thought that was a bit interesting.
I don't know how they agreed on Lawrence. Like, Lawrence got a good majority of the votes, and that must just be sheer luck of two opposite sides coming together last minute. Because I don't know how.
I mean, truly, it seemed like it was. I mean, that was the only like concrete plan that ended up being established, which was Matthew basically being like, "All right, Pegleg, Christopher, we're voting for Lawrence." You know, like just in case Nathan plays the idol, which at that point everyone pretty much knew that Nathan was saying he was going to do it, and we're just playing off of the fact that Nathan was going to play the idol. I mean, what did you also think about Nathan's move to tell Lawrence it's between you and Matthew, essentially?
I mean, I understand why because the thing is, this is my thing. Nathan was very open about his reasonings. And I kind of give Nathan that credit in the sense of you've been very open, because he even said like that's been his strategy, not the best, but not really. But him kind of at least saying to Lawrence like, hey, you're an option, here's why. It did technically give Lawrence the chance to plead his case and, you know, give him reasons to save himself. But overall, I do feel like Nathan's kind of how Nathan handled it. I don't think he handled it the best socially. And I feel like that's where he kind of like, pretty much that, Gabe. I feel like he did kind of play it really badly from a strategic standpoint.
It's kind of like the classic Survivor phrase where, like, if you win individual immunity or if you've got an idol in your pocket, suddenly you act a bit more cocky and you see people a bit more energetic in the confessional booth and when they're chatting. And I mean, you can even see from Nathan, I mean, Tribal Council, he is just laughing. That's the first time I've seen Nathan belly laugh at Joel at Tribal Council. He was a completely different man after that idol.
I will say, I didn't think it was... Before I knew what it was going to turn into, before I knew that the idol was going to get played, but no votes were going to be on Nathan at all, and Lawrence was going to be the vote to go home, I didn't think this was a horribly misguided move here to tell Lawrence that he's considering voting, because I expected that the reaction to that from Lawrence would be, I can't vote for Nathan. I have to put the vote on someone else.
Yeah.
But because of how it did turn out, it wasn't quite what I expected from a move like this, that I have to say it maybe wasn't one of the best moves, because it didn't seem like the objective was as clear, at least to me as a viewer, than what it was. But I think we've seen worse moves.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have IS who says it's crazy that no one thought to split at the final 7 in 45, but in UK they do.
Well, actually, funny you say this. I have something, speaking of kind of split votes and stuff. I don't know if either of you two have noticed this. Throughout the entire season, we have not had one unanimous vote. So we haven't had a single vote that's been like 5-1, 8-1, except for the mock vote. But technically, in terms of any castaway that has been fully voted out, there has been no unanimous vote, which I think is quite good. It's cool. A testament to everyone's kind of game there.
And we had 2 plurality votes last week back to back with Tanuki and Doug, so that just goes to show how insane it's been.
Yeah, that one.
Sorry, breaking your heart there, Ollie.
Thinking about Tanuki leaving again.
Last week, episodes 11 and 12, those were some sad episodes. I have to say, amazing to sort of see the game get shaked up like that. But I mean, I didn't want to say goodbye to those players yet. And we are at the point where it feels like we've sort of been on this journey with all of the players still left in the game. So it is kind of like, we know we're getting to the end now. It's hard to see any one of these players being the next to go because there's so few of them. I mean, I think we wouldn't be doing our jobs correctly. I know we're kind of going out of order here if we didn't just briefly mention Christopher and Matthew's realization that the trap had, in fact, been left open. I loved this. It was so obvious. I'm not even sure if anyone picked up on the fact that just the head turns, everything, the realization, the fear, it was amazing. I loved it. Every moment of it. Again, it played into the comedy of the episode.
I love that there's just no filter to Christopher. He's just like, you're an idiot. How could you ever do that? And there's no like thinking about, oh, like this might go back to bite me. This might hurt my social game. He's just leathering it on Matthew. And I love that.
It's so wonderful. And I know, and I mean, Christopher, you're right, goes just in on Matthew. And we see that not only continue in this episode, but in next episode as well. It is going to be very hard for Christopher to forgive Matthew for this mistake. But we do have to move on from here. We go to tribal council. Matthew apologizes for voting out Tanuki. What do you think? Right? No. And this is why at the beginning when we were talking about Matthew, I'm nervous for how Matthew might respond to some of his moves in a final tribal.
Yep. First of all, I just clarify, Tanuki going in, when she came up, she looked really beautiful. I just want to point that out. I thought she looked flawless. Her and Ashley been serving looks, just saying. But with when Matthew was talking about that, and you saw kind of Tanuki's realization, I was kind of sat there and I was like, own the move. You did it. Yes, you can feel bad. I wish he had said, I really feel bad because I love Tanuki as a person, but it's what I had to do for the game. And I feel like he wasn't able to fully convey that because he had those emotions. It clouded the perception of people. So that's what I feel like was really bad for him there. But again, I think Tanuki would understand it a bit more because I feel like when she looked, because we had a lot of camera angles to Tanuki, a lot of like when there was answers, it went straight to Tanuki. And when we look at her facial expressions to how she was when Matthew was speaking to be fair, how Lawrence was speaking, it was very clear she was over Lawrence more than Matthew because I saw specifically that she rolled her eyes when Lawrence said something after Matthew.
Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to what I was saying. Like, Tanuki is one of the biggest players. She owns that. If you're going to take out Tanuki, like put her name down. Tanuki's not going to be mad at you. She understands the game.
Yes.
Like if you want to play up this whole like mateship loyalty thing, Tanuki's not really the person to do it on. And I think that's why she was like, okay, Lawrence, whatever, just moving on.
Yeah.
And we also have to talk about Nathan and his decision to reveal who his ideal final three was, and then who also made it into his final five. I didn't get a chance to ask Nathan about this, but I don't know if there's much more to really say where it seemed like the impact of saying something like this was lost on Nathan. It was sad to see, unfortunately, because it's not a great thing to admit at tribal council who your ideal final three is and who your ideal final five is. And I think, unfortunately, this really set the stage for what we know happens in episode 14.
Yeah. When he was speaking about it, I was like, why are you saying that? Like, Nathan, shh. Because we got the great kind of reaction from Leilani of the realization, oh, I was going to be 4th or 5th, most likely 4th. But obviously we can kind of say we didn't really see anything materialize from there. But I mean, at the end of the day, he was there with a strategy. And I think it just got to the point where I think to Nathan's credit, he had Christopher hammering.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, I think Nathan was just like, I've kind of built a game on somewhat being straightforward, so let me be straightforward. And I think he was trying to do that in the sense of, because he's been very vocal about how devious he believes Christopher is and the type of game Christopher's playing. So I feel like he may have just done that to be like, right, here is my open and honest straightforward thing. This is what was the plan. Obviously that's not the plan anymore, but that makes me a free agent. And I think he was trying to kind of push it in a narrative of, Christopher's saying that he hasn't got this plan, but we all know he has. I feel like that's the angle he was trying to pull, but it may have not come across to everyone.
I think he's trying to like appeal to Matthew as well by
Mm.
saying, well, you could have had a final three. The problem is you kind of see it in his eyes where he says the thing about how there's a final three, and then his eyes like pop wide open. He's like, oh no, I said that. And he has to like backpedal and say, well, he doesn't know how the final five is going to go with challenge wins and stuff. But yeah, like I was really surprised that Leilani seemingly was just willing to forgive him after he basically said that he would have voted her out.
I mean, it's a very difficult position because I could see, again, to your points, I could see where Nathan was coming from too, especially where he let me know in our interview, like Matthew, Tanuke were all very active in making sure that they were all set on the final three between each other. So it's kind of hard going into a tribal council where Tanuke was just voted out because of a vote that Matthew put on Tanuke, and sort of trying to reiterate, like, we had something special here. And I don't know where that got lost in translation. We have a comment from Rob who says, a polite request for a Spark or Snuff episode for the jury outfits, please. Yes, for those of you who don't know, if you haven't watched any US coverage, the team here at Got Something For You do a Spark or Snuff where we are ranking the castaways outfits. We've done the island outfits for the Survivor 45 castaways, and we sort of do it on and off for the jury outfits. But Rob, great idea for a video.
Well, we can confirm that Ashley and Tanuke episode 13's jury outfits were both a Spark.
We get Nathan, who plays his hidden immunity idol, but he did not need to, because 5 votes go. I had to count it real quick. 5 votes go on Lawrence. Leilani votes for Pegleg, and Lawrence votes for Hannah, which Lawrence let me know that he and Matthew had an agreement that they would put votes onto Hannah, which I thought was really interesting. So 5 votes on Lawrence. Nathan didn't have to play the idol. This was really interesting. We have Lawrence ends up getting eliminated from the game. We have CB, who says, very much looking forward to your analysis on last week and the finals coming up. CB, thank you so much for that comment. So we're so excited to, the end of the season is coming up, and we are excited to cover it as well. With that, why don't we take a very, very quick 1-minute break, and then we will be right back to talk about episode 14.
My name is Jonah Fielko, and I'm the CEO of Bracketology.tv, fantasy sports for reality television. We offer fantasy games for shows like The Bachelor, Survivor, Big Brother, RuPaul's Drag Race, and counting. You start by creating a community. Within your community, you can create a fantasy league for each show that you want to play fantasy games for. Within the league, you can choose up to 3 of our 4 game types, and our most popular is the Advanced League. Choose a team of contestants, and depending on what they do and say during the episode, that's how your team will gain or lose points each week. We also have elimination-style games like our Confidence Pool. This is where you choose how confident you are that each contestant will survive elimination that week. And we've also got March Madness-style brackets. Come back a couple hours after the episode to check your scores and watch you climb the leaderboard. Bracketology is free to play, so grab your friends, your family, your coworkers, and head to Bracketology.tv for more info.
Okay, so we get Leilani, who is going to start us off with a little goodbye to Lawrence by sacrificing the Sex Pants Cherry Lawrence.
Yeah. Do you know what? I actually found this really funny, and I loved that they put it in, because I feel like we needed those moments of just like complete hilarity. And it's just kind of, again, I always talk about this. I love a good, just organic human element in Survivor. And I felt like this was just that, let's just do this funny thing. And yeah, it was a nice breakup, because it wasn't all just strategy.
It was a good send-off to Lawrence. Gone but not forgotten, our naked man who constantly gave us days updates.
Yeah.
We will never forget those pasty white cheeks.
Any other final remarks on Lawrence's gameplay? I know we kind of jumped right into episode 14, but it was interesting to see Lawrence go. I thought he might make it a little bit further, but I think that ultimately how things were handled with Tanuke, and then the circumstances that led up to who had immunity, who had idols when, sort of ultimately led to his downfall.
Yeah. I think if Lawrence was ever, I'm hoping if Lawrence ever got the chance to play again, that he kind of sees how he approached the game strategically was never going to help him. I feel like we were kind of seeing, especially in the last few episodes, he really, if he'd made it to the end, he was going to struggle to convince the jury. However, we can't deny he was as Gabe said in the chat, he was a fun character this season. I did enjoy some of his little quips, some of the things that came out of his brain. I was just like, how? So I enjoyed him.
I know he was a good humorous presence, and I think overall, seeing his full story, I'm glad that he was on the show, and I'm happy he got casted. Very fun character.
I agree. And again, bringing it back to 14th, this moment with the underwear burning was I thought was also hilarious. We kind of see a little glimpse into Chris and Matthew's game future, what they hope to achieve, which is Nathan being voted out next, followed by Pegleg. So it was good to sort of see players sort of thinking about their order of operations in terms of who to vote out next. We also learned from Nathan where he feels comfortable with his relationship with Leilani, and then he is like relatively comfortable with his relationship with Hannah and Pegleg. So it seems like Nathan's still trying to like find his footing at this point, and who he's really aligned with at this point.
Yeah, I think going back to Christopher and Matthew, I think it's a very risky strategy for them because I think it's playing with fire almost, because if that was to happen, you're basically going into a final five or even a final four with who can actually trust you then, because let's hypothetically think about this. Obviously, they have gotten rid of Nathan at 6. They try to target Pegleg. Who are you going to ask? Because you can't ask Hannah.
That would involve flipping Leilani after turning on Nathan. So.
Yeah, and after like Christopher has basically not been Leilani's biggest fan. Yeah. That's where I'm kind of sat there going, I understand it, but in practicality, are you? And again, we know that they've been sleep deprived, hungry for like 30 days. So obviously maybe that whole thing they're not thinking of, but it is that thing of looking at the bigger picture. So I did think that was a bit, I could see the loopholes. I feel like with Nathan as well now, I feel like he's kind of, we see him this episode finally realizing like he needs to have a more open game in his relationships. And I feel like he did really try, especially with that first conversation with kind of Hannah and Peg. Like we see him at the start of episode really trying.
Yeah, that's sort of like he's like, okay, I need my strategy to switch up a little bit here. I'm going to focus my time and energy on improving my relationship with Hannah and Pegleg. But we also know that Hannah has had some issues with how Nathan handled I'm going to say the episode before, but the day before leading up to the tribal council. We have a compliment for you, Bandit.
Thank you.
And again, our live chat is open, so thank you all who are joining us. We love seeing your thoughts and opinions on the episode as well, so make sure you join us as we're recording live. All right, we do go to our reward challenge. It's a classic. You are going to use your body to transfer mud from a pit to a bucket, and the player with the most mud in their bucket after 15 minutes wins a trip to the Survivor Spa with the fruit platters and prosecco. And I mean, it sounds very nice.
Sounds lovely.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they always do the mud challenges to have a spa rewards. Like I can't think of the last time they didn't.
Yeah,
it makes the most sense.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I think it was just because I had just watched Cook Islands before this. And they had this reward and they had the top 3 people all going. Whereas this time it was just the winner and then they picked. So in my brain, I was sat there going, why not just the top 3 then? Because make it fair. But obviously I just watched Cook Islands. But yeah, this one, it's one of those, when you're watching it, there's still kind of that little bit of, they're flinging themselves in mud and you're like, probably sitting there on your sofa with a blanket on, being like, couldn't do that.
Yeah. And then halfway through the challenge, you don't know who's who anymore. They're just all just
Yeah.
muddy individuals, and you just give up.
Well, funny you say that, because Pegleg, there was hardly any mud, and I think Hannah didn't even have like a muddy face. But the montage I did feel like was quite funny. It was when it was the and you just see everyone. I say everyone. You see Christopher.
Yeah. Every time someone dove into the mud, very cool camera shot. And I agree with the montage. I was so nervous about their landing. I was hoping we wouldn't see, because it's a very shallow pit, and I know the mud sort of cushions it before you can really get that deep into it. But it really scared me. And I agree with this, Gabe. On the bright side, you do get a mud bath even if you don't win. It's Matthew, ever listened to Swan Lake soundtrack before? Where does it rank in your Mud Mask playlist? I don't know what this means, but I haven't. I just, side note, I would really love to go see a ballet eventually at some point. That just got me thinking about it. So maybe it will be Swan Lake. Yeah. I thought that this was fun. Pegleg ends up being invited because Christopher ends up winning the reward, but it comes down to the two of them. And he invites Hannah, and he also invites Pegleg. And we know Christopher is always gaming at this point. So I think he made a good choice with who he chose to bring on the reward. Does anyone feel otherwise?
And I feel like it was good to leave Matthew behind, because we literally get confessional after confessional from Matthew being like, I understand why he put me here. It's because he wanted to talk to the other two. So you know, it's the classic thing. You take the swings with you, you feed them up, and then you try and get them to work with you. Classic manipulation.
I mean, classic Christopher strategy there, to be fair.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
And you know what? It looked lovely. And we also see, I wonder if this is going to sort of work its way into the story of the next episode, but the whole idea where Christopher and Leilani are perceiving that the other one doesn't like the other, because they both say something very interesting. I forget the exact quote, but both of them say like, oh, Leilani doesn't really like me so much, or Leilani's over here saying, oh, Christopher doesn't really like me so much. So I wonder how that's going to play out.
Yeah. Well, again, as I mentioned like earlier in the hypothetical thing, I sit there and I go, how are you going to get to the end when you're trying to do all this, Christopher? But it's interesting, because it's like, I know there's the phrase, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. In Survivor, you don't really want your enemies getting down to the wire, because you want to ensure that you can get people to vote them out.
Exactly.
But yeah, I feel like that's definitely, if we're going to see any of that, it's going to be next episode. And I feel like I'll have my theories on why that is. So.
I had so many high hopes for the Christopher Leilani relationships. Like, it was like a honeymoon phase pre-merge. They were talking about the fish and they were getting along. And now apparently just out of nowhere, they hate each other coming into the merge.
Well, I think it's purely because I think it's to do with Christopher's stance on the game. Because obviously we remember during the Tanuke blindside, he kind of did call out Nathan, Leilani and Tanuke as being on their hollybobs. And we have kind of seen Christopher be very critical of when people aren't jumping on opportunities. I know someone in the chat a little bit earlier on, let me find, it was IS, he put, I liked that Christopher pointed out that Pegleg didn't even want to try and look, showing that Pegleg is not a proactive player this bit. And it's Christopher, and I am actually going to disagree with that comment. I do actually think Peg is a proactive player. I actually defend, just side note, I defend Pegleg in this instance because Pegleg has been in these last two episodes in a very good swing position. He's been the person everyone's had to come to. So I think in that instance, Pegleg probably looked at it and went, I have no, like, this doesn't benefit my game right now. Why am I going to try and find something when I'm in a decent position? So I feel like that's may of why he didn't go for it, because Pegleg's been a very much of a, if I don't need to, why am I going to do it? Why am I going to, like, he would rather not take the risk because he's a very logical player. Back to the main thing. Christopher has been very critical, and he will always point out who hasn't been proactive in his eyes. And I feel like that's where the him and Leilani issue have been, because he's been very critical of Leilani, saying like, she's not playing. And it's almost kind of been like Leilani going, Christopher, I'm here, babes. Like, how am I not playing if I'm still here? So I feel like that's where the feud has been.
Yeah, because I feel like he is like trying to show that like because basically we have a confessional from Christopher previously where he says like Leilani, she's saying that she's not playing the game, but I see her, she is playing the game. I think that's why he votes for her at the Doug Tribal Council.
Yes.
But like I feel like he's trying to like really prove that like Leilani is playing the game, and I mean I'm not sure if Leilani's playing the game, but Christopher believes that she's playing it hard anyway.
I do wonder what questions Leilani will get if she makes it to the final three. This is the part of the game where I start thinking about like the questions I would ask each of them if I was on jury, and any combination of the three of them, or any combination of who's remaining ends up at final three. Like, it makes me just very curious to know if you were on the jury and you're in our live chat, what questions would you ask these castaways at this point in the game? Let us know. So we already talked about Christopher sort of really trying to work up some sort of a working relationship with Hannah and Pegleg, and Pegleg caught on to that real quickly, and he and Hannah have the discussion of just like, yeah, we know why we're here, like let's just enjoy it. But also Christopher is a big threat to win a lot of the remaining challenges, because he's already won. I think he already said in the episode, he won like many of the reward challenges, and then has also been.
Well, Reese, like, obviously, he won last episode's immunity, and he's just won this reward. I know he won the Shut Your Trap reward. He won the Hold Up one. So I think he's won pretty much all, like most of them, if not all of them. My brain will go and remember. But I also think that they're very wary of Christopher, because they know how almost openly strategic Christopher has been. So they know to kind of keep Christopher at arm's length, which I think is fair enough.
It's true. I mean, Christopher has sort of built a reputation for his gameplay. At this point, we go back to camp after the reward, and Christopher and Matthew are already talking about how it's Nathan who's going to be the next to go if he doesn't win immunity. We also get this interaction between Hannah and Nathan, where Hannah sort of calls Nathan out or wants to let him know how his reactions and behavior the day before made her feel. And I was hoping that this could be resolved in terms of both of their gameplay. I really was hoping that they could work together at the tribal council. And I thought that might be where the story was going, but it was, we got to hear Nathan's perspective on it all as well. And he sort of, he tells her that he appreciates the feedback. So I was hoping that maybe she would be able to find a way to work with him further into the game. But it was an interesting segment to see.
Yeah. I again, it's kind of, I liked that, because you never really are able to kind of see that in Survivor. You're never able to see two people kind of come and be like, this did actually kind of rub me the wrong way, and can we just have a conversation about it? It's very rare we see them. So I enjoyed the conversation, because I thought it was very organic, and you saw that from both sides there was respect, and it was, I just want to say this to you as a friend. And I feel like there was no bad blood with it. And I feel like Hannah knew she could have that conversation with Nathan as opposed to others. She knew that she could kind of just be like, hey, I just need to get this off my chest. And Nathan is a very logical person to be like, I respect that, and just keep it at that level. It's not going to affect them game-wise. Nathan, anyway.
It was very good seeing like Nathan's rationale for it as well. Like, him being like, okay, well, like, that's what I thought I was doing, but actually, thank you for bringing it up. And it is kind of unfortunate that I feel like this is the sticking point that Hannah uses to side with Christopher and stuff. But, like, that's a Survivor at the end of the day. You've always got to be making sure you got everyone on your side.
We go to the immunity challenge next, where we get confirmation that this is, in fact, a final three and not a final 2, which was finally we got confirmation. I know it was switching on Wikipedia every day. The challenge is to race to retrieve a key from a dock to unlock a puzzle pieces. And the first to complete the puzzle wins immunity. We finally got a puzzle. Gabe, I see your comment. I'm going to get to it when we get to the tribal council. And Pegleg wins immunity. So that was cool. The puzzle was cool. I liked this
I
puzzle
loved
a
it.
lot.
Yeah.
Can we just chat about the fact we've had a puzzle? Like, thank
Yeah,
you, Survivor.
finally.
Thank you so much.
It
I thought
took
they were
into
banned
the
this
final
season.
6. But this is like, again,
I waited 7 weeks for this.
that. But like,
It's
again,
kind of bittersweet though, right? Because we
Yeah.
got it, but it's also like you said, Ollie, right at the final 6.
final 6. But again, this is why I'm hoping that the BBC and kind of the producers and the editors, not the editors, but the people that actually fundamentally decide like what happens, I hope they see the British public's and just Survivor fans' reactions and are like, okay, let's add some more puzzles. Let's add more obstacle courses, because again, that is Survivor.
Mhm.
We need those puzzles.
And like, it was a puzzle, yeah, and I know that some people like to say the puzzles are boring, but it was a really close end game. I mean, we had Nathan, Christopher, and Pegleg all a couple pieces away from winning. So, if anything, it was one of the most intense challenges.
Yeah. Also, actually, I want to shout out Leilani on this, because I actually noticed she was putting the puzzle together on the ground. And I thought that was really smart, because you saw everyone trying to like figure it out in that thing. And I do think, because I caught it when they did a big bird's eye view, I saw what Leilani was doing. And I thought it was really smart of her, because for me, if I'm not good at puzzles, I need to visualize what it is before I even hang it up. So I think her doing that, I just wanted to give her a quick shout out, because I noticed that and thought it was really smart.
That's a good call out, because I too feel like with a puzzle like this that has to be suspended in the air, I would lose track of the puzzle pieces. If it's not immediately the one that goes next, I would throw it to the side and then forget that I even looked at it until later. So I do agree. I think that was a really cool strategy as well. But Pegleg does end up with the win. He wins immunity. And we go back to Kalena. Leilani says that she made a mistake voting Doug out and not Chris. That was a really interesting thing for me to hear. I forget, did she admit this to someone, or was this just a confessional?
No, this was just a confessional.
This was just a confessional. Okay.
But again, it just adds to the Christopher and Leilani feud, which I think at this point, we both know if one of them makes the jury and one makes final tribal, they're not voting for each other. So it's fine. What I found really interesting, though, about this pre-tribal discussion, and actually this entire episode, we finally got a lot of Hannah content. Because to me, this episode, the person that really had the control and kind of had the final say was Hannah. I don't know if either of you to agree with me on that one.
I would agree, yeah, and it's kind of unfortunate because we've already heard a lot of like Hannah's stuff through other people. Like even I think it was last week we had Pegleg talking about how them and Hannah could keep their two under the radar so much, but we didn't really hear that from Hannah's perspective. So it is good, as you say, Ollie, to be getting this perspective from Hannah about how, I mean, they're essentially in the swing position, her and Pegleg. So I think that's good content for her.
I mean, that's not always I don't always see it as a terrible thing when a player comments on the role another player has in their game or in their thing. But I agree, Bandit, with the extent that we saw of almost sort of framing it as, even though it's not like the move to keep their alliance low key is sort of the idea of Pegleg in a sense. Like I think that's how the narrative sort of drew it out to be. I did like hearing from Hannah here, recognizing that the jury is not a fan of Chris and sort of thinking, okay, maybe I want to sit next to Chris at the end. You know, like I think that's a very fair idea to come up with at this point.
Yeah, I am like so conflicted on it, whether Chris is a goat, someone that is going to be so easily beat at the end, or whether he's a massive jury threat. And I feel like that really depends on how bitter the jury's going to be, because it can really sway either way, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have it in a similar way, but I do feel like I think the big obstacle Christopher has if he makes it to the end is going to be his jury management and his social plays. Because I feel like that's where he's really stumbled. I feel like, because again, when I say jury management and social plays, he called Tanuke, Leilani, and Nathan out as on their hollybobs. Obviously, he made remarks to Pegleg, had a fight with him and Lee were always at odds. So right now, I'm kind of I'm sat there going, like right now he has Ashley, and Ashley is the one on the jury that can defend Chris's game. But what Chris would need to do is own up to his social kind of hiccups and the fact that yes, he was there to play strategically, because I think his main issue, and I feel like we've seen this on Survivor 45 with someone else, is that there were points in the game where Christopher was treating them more as pawns and not people. And I feel like if he can own that and kind of justify, then maybe he has a chance. But I feel like right now he does have a very big uphill social battle.
Yeah, I would kind of want to see if I was on the jury and Chris was in the final three. I would kind of want to, maybe it depends on who, like how I'm voting or whatever happened if I was playing with Chris. But I think a lot of this jury is going to want to see a more humble version of Chris at the final three if he makes it there. And I think that Chris would really benefit from painting each person as a very important part of his journey to the end and making them realize you had to go at this time. Otherwise I could not move farther. And it just had to happen for me to get here. But I think people are going to be looking for him to be a little bit more humble if he were to get to final three.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, he's been very open. And like, this is where I feel like this is where his struggle is. He's been openly critical. If he had just said this in confessionals, no harm done. But again, when he openly argues with Nathan at Tribal and kind of criticizes his game, when he does that with Leilani, when he's done that with others, that's where he will, again, as we've said, he'll struggle at finding Tribal Council. And I agree with you, Matt. He just needs to go in there humbled and be like, it was my surviving. These are the points that I want to make. I'm sorry if what I said offended anyone. This was the position I was in. If he can go with that aspect, then absolutely he has a chance. Will we see that? I don't know.
Gabe says Christopher has the best story, just has to hope jury aren't bitter. Yeah. I think Christopher has definitely had a very fun story to watch. Also just the fact that he was targeted so many times and made it through so many times due to whatever happening. I mean, it was really fascinating to watch. But I do have to say, I think that jury management, I think, is something that Christopher has been lacking in. So a bitter jury.
I think the thing with Christopher is that like he can be a bit testy with some of the jury, but I think the jury's also going to respect to a certain degree that he made it to the end. I mean, Tanuke's final words were literally, "I would laugh if they let Christopher get to the end of the game." So even she understands how ridiculous it would be to let such a massive threat all the way to the end. So it's just so hard to say. But we do know that Chris can be performative and he can, turn on things if he needs to. So that could go both ways as well. So
sorry, I was just doing a Christopher facial expression.
I mean,
he can turn on the charm if he needs to.
At the end of the day, it is a television show, so why not? Put on a little bit more of a character. We go to Tribal Council. One thing to note is that Lawrence does not show up at Tribal Council. It does look like in the preview for next week that he is there. So I'm glad that he's all right. But yeah, they did let us know that he was under medical supervision at the time that this Tribal Council was filmed. And I didn't really was there anything else here that was said or done that is noteworthy?
Not from my perspective.
I can't really think of anything.
Yeah,
there.
I don't think there was much said that we haven't already heard. That's another mark against the season, in my opinion, is it seems like the tribal councils have been a little repetitive to me in
Yeah.
terms of the questions that have been asked and also the responses that were given as well. It seems like we focus in a lot on like, is trust important?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like this,
go ahead,
like, I feel like this, sorry, I was just gonna say, I feel like this tribal, it was very much everyone, because I said it a fair few tribals ago when I was talking about how Christopher was already really obviously misting with answers. And I feel like everyone did it this tribal. No one was giving anything away, which meant that Joel really had nothing to go off because everyone was like, nope, I'm not saying anything. You're not getting much from me. Sorry about it.
Yeah. And it's kind of like an issue that happened quite a lot in modern Survivor, like 41 to 44, is everyone would just make analogies and it would be just the most confusing thing ever. It's like, just stop talking about being a kid in a theme park. Just actually say some like tangible words to me. But we do know that Pegleg's now apparently a challenge beast because he won 2 challenges. So shout out to Pegleg.
Yes.
That's true. I'm curious to hear both of your takes on Gabe's comment here, thinking that Hannah messed up by not voting out Christopher at this tribal council, because voting out Christopher makes Matthew a solo player, and then Christopher would run to Hannah and Pegleg and not Nathan, since Nathan wanted Christopher out. I could see that actually being very beneficial.
Yeah.
I guess it was just a matter of Hannah had to weigh the options of, do we go this route, right, with this sort of move? Or again, it seems like she is pretty set on, I might want to sit next to Christopher at the final 3.
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on what her and Pegleg, because they are obviously clearly a duo, so that's why I'm referencing both of them. I feel like it's what they'd want to do moving forward. Obviously, I feel like they're smart enough to know that right now, Christopher and Leilani are not going to work together. So it might be the case of they just wanted to ensure they still stayed in the middle, or at least if Christopher or Matthew did turn on them, they have the comfort of knowing that the swing vote's Leilani, who clearly will not go with.
Yeah,
like
so I think
Christopher.
if they take out Christopher here, Matthew becomes the swing vote between Leilani and Nathan, and then them two. Whereas if they take out Nathan here, as they do, then they basically become the swing vote because Christopher and Leilani, as you said, Ollie, they're not going to work together. So that basically guarantees that they'll get the 4 outside of shenanigans with idols and stuff. But yeah, I feel like there's this term in Survivor which is a shield, and I'm not sure about the terminology that like Pegleg know. I'm not sure how big fans they are. I know Hannah said she watched Australian Survivor, but like Christopher is such a big target at the final 5 that that's just someone they can easily get out. And then at that point, Hannah and Pegleg, they're tight 2 at the final 4, so they've got fire at least.
Yeah. I don't think Hannah messed up on her vote. I think maybe her reasonings weren't. I don't see the reasonings as much, only because for me, as when I look at it logically as a player, when she talked about what the reasons why she was voting out Nathan, I kind of sat there and I went, these are all things that you've also said about Christopher. So it kind of needed to be, I needed her to give something just a little bit more. I needed her to basically also say, you're more of a threat. Here are the reasons why you're a threat. Because she kind of was just like, you've shown your true colors and I don't really know. And I'm like, but you've also said throughout the entire game that you can't trust Christopher. So why is it that after one move, you can't really trust Nathan, but then you've seen the entirety of Chris's? That was where I was kind of looking at it going, if she tried to explain that final tribal, again, the loopholes would be there for me.
And sorry, I read your comment wrong. You, Gabe, you meant that Matthew would run to Hannah and Pegleg after Christopher was out. Okay, but I think it still holds, especially your responses. I agree. We have our final 5. Who are you paying the attention to at this? Like, okay, like who do you think's in the best position here? Who do you think is in the worst position here? And if you're in our live chat, play along.
Bandit, you go first.
Oh, well, I would like to announce my secret occupation. I've hit it for 70 minutes now. Under my name, I am an objective peg leg stan. I have been for the past 7 weeks, and I will not stop coming into week 8. I do love peg leg, and I hope that he can like pull it out. I know that he's got his relationship with Hannah, so I feel like he's pretty locked in for the final tribal council. But for right now, my money would probably be on Matthew or Christopher if they got to the end winning. I mean, there's this very like small moment which makes me think that it is going to happen, where Matthew goes up to Pegleg and Hannah and he says this is the final 3. This is a 3-person group, so foreshadowing.
Yeah, I clocked that as well, and I was like, wow. And that's why I thought that, you know, if they got rid of Christopher, that's Matthew's kind of go-to. I think right now Hannah and Pegleg are in the best positions. Do I think both of them have a strong enough case at the moment? That's what I need to see. I feel like Pegleg does have a couple of strong relationships on the jury that will help him. But I do feel like everyone has some sort of has something to bargain with. Because I'm going to say this now. Just because Leilani has not had the best track record, she still has a really underdog story. Because remember, she was voted out of Calaton and she's managed to get her way up to the end. Has she been the most strategic? No, but she still has a good underdog story. And to be fair, I don't think any of us picked her to be in the final 5. If any of us started the preseason and someone told us Leilani was going to be in the final 5, no one that had done a podcast, I don't think anyone was like, yeah, we'll see that. We see that happening. So I do give her that credit. Does she have enough to win yet? Again, similar to kind of Hannah and Peg, it would be a long shot. I feel like the person that has the best chance for me personally is actually Matthew. I think Matthew has the best chance.
We talked about what Christopher would have to do if he made it to the final 3 and he was responding to his game answering for his game in front of the jury. With Leilani, I agree with you, Ollie. I think that if Leilani is there in final 3, she would really need to really dig into the underdog narrative of how she was able to get to where she ended up. Gabe says, this is Gabe's ranking of who he would like to, who they would like to see win. Christopher, Matthew, Hannah, Pegleg, and Leilani in that order. Amazing. And I'm also going to agree with you, Gabe. It is a wide open ending. And I also have no idea who is going to take it home. I feel like that has been part of the excitement with this post-merge part of Survivor UK. The game really feels like it kind of could be anyone's at this point. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the jury is going to go about with how they give out this title. With that, I think we are going to have to end the stream here. Thank you all so much for such an amazing fun time. Bandit, thank you for joining us on Survivor Now podcast. We'd love to have you here anytime. Now, from all of us here on Survivor Now, remember to lock your lobster traps, and we will see you next time.
Love it.